only 11% of education decision makers were looking at any types of evidence to make a purchasing decision on an edtech tool.
Today, we are diving into a conversation about tools and technology in education. They're all around us, but are they effective? How do you find out? And how do you get into this business if you're interested in making education tools? That's all coming up.
Yeah, those are really, really good questions, Dan. Super important. And you've got to consider those as you are thinking about creating something, right? But it gets a little bit sticky when profits and public good collide. So let's get started. Welcome to Schools In. I am Denise Pope. I'm a senior lecturer with the Graduate School of Education at Stanford and co-founder of Challenge Success. And I am here today with my co-host, Dan Schwartz, who is the Dean of the Graduate School of Education.
Denise Entrepreneur Pope. It's good to see you.
Do you think I'm an entrepreneur?
Didn't you say you're the co-director of Challenge Success?
Yeah, I mean, it's a nonprofit. But yeah, I guess so.
Okay.
Entrepreneur sounds like I should be making a lot of money. And let me tell you, that's not happening.
I see. Yes. Yes. Okay.
Dan, we're going to start out with a little thought experiment today. I'm very excited for our guests. We're going to start out with the thought experiment that's going to get us into the topic. I'm not even going to talk about the topic yet. So here's the thought experiment. I got asked to do this a couple weeks ago at a retreat that was led by a futurist, which for those of you who don't know what that is, I'm actually not even 100% sure what a futurist does. They think about the future and then I guess backwards plan to think about how that helps you think about what you should do today. I probably botched that. In any case, here was the question I was asked. You need to design a school for your great grandchild.
Okay.
All right, Dan, putting you on the spot. What does that school look like? Tell us.
It looks like a doctor's office. My child comes in and they put in the new math chip into his head. And then, later he gets the English writing chip. And that's it.
Okay, that's the scariest thing I ever heard. So they're literally just putting in chips into people's head, and that is what the role of learning is going to look like for our great.
You just can't stuff their head with enough knowledge. So let's just cut to the quick and just put in the chip.
Well, so your answer and my answer were completely different.
You think?
Yeah. Do you want to know what my answer was? And I am a glass is half full person. I am an optimist. And yet here was my answer. I said, I honestly don't think schools are going to be all that different from what they are today, years and years and years and years from now, with a few exceptions. You might get there in a flying car. It might take place in like a really futuristic looking building or whatever, but there's still going to be probably some adult/robot at the front of the room filling people's heads in some way, shape, or form. And that is because I just know how sticky the grammar of schooling is, right? Which is a Larry Cuban and David Tyack word. It's just sticky.
Sorry, did you just say no change? It could be a robot in front of the classroom, and that's not a change.
No, it's a change. But like if you think about actually how learning occurs, I don't know that it's going to be that. It's still going to be some kind of interaction between an educator type thing or person and a learner type thing or person.
So do you think schools will still have bells? That it's like time to switch from period 1 to period 2?
I will tell you, some of the Challenge Success schools have gotten rid of bells, and it seems like such a little thing, but it's huge. It makes you feel not like a widget in a machine.
And you don't think by the 7 generations from now, it'll just be the chip in their head that vibrates to tell them to move?
Oh God, that's just so scary.
I know.
So scary to me. Okay, how does this relate to our awesome guest that we have today?
Because you sort of wonder where innovations in education are going to come from. Yeah. And so the reason I called you entrepreneur is that, a lot of people think education's a public good. So I believe it's about About 90% of our kids go to public schools, and they get the service that the public provides. People don't think of school as a product, right? If there's a product, I get to choose which washing machine I want. So there are people who would like that, the version of schools as a product. But for a lot of people, school is a public good. At the same time, schools, everything inside of the school, they had to buy. They had to buy products.
Who's they?
And, schools. A school has to go buy desks.
Yeah.
They have to go buy the chips that they're going to put in the kids' heads. Right. Yeah. And so these are all products. And so I'm kind of interested in whether the monopoly over the creation of those products is changing. Right. So it really used to be textbook publishers to a large extent. So let me ask you a question, Denise. About 10 years ago, roughly, there were 0 unicorns in education. So a unicorn is a startup that's worth $1 billion. So how many do you think there were, say, last year? 10 years ago, there were $0 billion startups in education.
Have no idea, but I would think there would be a lot more than 0, given all that's going on in the edtech world. Is that a fair answer?
Is a lot more 2? I mean, 2 times 0 is infinity. So
I'm going to say, I have no, over $1 billion, 100? I don't know.
Oh, that was good. Yeah. So it's about 50.
Okay.
50
Yay.
Plus. So this is a big change, right? And so it's kind of, how did all these companies start to get into the market, creating products that schools are buying, right? This is a change. And so we've brought in Isabelle Howe, who is a world's expert. She's worked at the intersection of philanthropy, impact investing, and education for over 2 decades. She was the founding director or a partner of a firm called Imaginable Futures. She serves on several nonprofit organizations to improve student outcomes. She's going to have a book on early childhood. And we're very lucky. She is the director of the Stanford Accelerator for Learning, which is a university level initiative to try and get all of Stanford working on the problem of how to improve educational outcomes for children and adults. So Isabelle, thank you for coming.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Dan and Denise. Such a joy to be with the two of you.
We're excited.
What is the answer? How come suddenly there's all these startups making lots of money in education? What's changed?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of what has changed, and by the way, it's not only the number of unicorns; it's just the amount of investments it has risen in this education technology space, broadly speaking, by 40 times over the past.
Say that again. 40.
Yeah, 40 over
40
the past
times.
40 times increase over the past 10 years. So huge increase in education technology investments for sure. What has driven this? I mean, Dan, on your question, I think a lot of it has to do with this theme that you have highlighted for a long time around the scientific revolution, and 2 of the sub-themes being this rise in technology in education that's driving those education technology startups and companies and organizations. Some are for-profit, some are non-profit. And then the amount of data that schools are managing is increasing too. That also leads to new forms of pedagogy, new forms of assessments. Anyway, so I think these 2 themes are leading a number of private sector providers to come in this public, traditionally public sector education.
So to free up the money to purchase these new products, what's getting squeezed out? Like, I'm not paying teachers because I can get a cheaper teaching machine?
So a lot of it has been, increasing budgets rather than squeezing existing budgets from schools, as well as new pools of capital being created to fund some of those organizations that didn't exist before. So a lot of private sector funding has supported some of those organizations that's not coming from public pools of funding.
So Denise, you think this is a good thing?
Well, I'm struggling with it, right? Because on the one hand, it's a good thing that people are paying more attention. And if this is going to help students and teachers, if it's going to do some real good, I'm excited about that. On the other thing, I worry that there's this tension because people who want to make money from products don't necessarily always put what's best for students and teachers at the center of that. Is that a fair way to say that, Isabelle? Can you say more about that tension?
Totally agree. For me, there are three levels of issues. One is simply that schools are buying, and a lot of those tools, 2/3 of those tools are not actually being used. So there's a waste somewhere, whether they are whoever is spending the money, there's a big waste in terms of those tools not actually reaching out to the students as it was intending. A second issue regarding equity, a lot of these tools are not getting equitably distributed because of who funds and how it's being funded. And then there is a third issue that we are addressing, or we're trying to address at the Accelerator for Learning, which is that a lot of tools, we don't really know if they actually are delivering on the outcomes for kids or for teachers. So we don't know if they work.
So look, can we take that like one by one? Are you okay with that, Dan?
Yeah.
So the first one is they might not even getting to the audience that they're supposed to reach. And I can tell you, when I first started teaching, this is actually true. We got all these new computers, and they were sitting in their boxes in a locked room that I could not access because there was some rule that did not allow me to access these computers until I went through some training, which nobody had taken at our particular school. So beautiful,
Denise,
brand new stuff sitting in boxes.
So Denise, I have a theory about this. Actually,
yeah.
I think it's no longer applicable. But so this is a long story. Everybody, be patient.
Oh boy.
So before I went to college, I taught in Kenya, in rural Kenya, and the sort of the equivalent of the mayor of the town invited me to his house, and he had whitewashed the floor. It was a big deal, right? Because I was like from the U.S. And he put me in a room with a portable radio, and the radio was on, me and the radio for 15 minutes, and the radio played nothing but static. And then he came back in and he said to me, "How do you like my radio?" And I said, "It's lovely," So I think over the years, I finally figured out why he did that. He was showing that he was thinking of the future. There's no radio stations yet, but he's going to be ready for it. And technology was the signal. So I think that's what a lot of the computer purchases were. They were a statement to the families, to the community, that we are looking to the future, which I think was frivolous a little bit, too expensive, but I understand why they did it. Now, I don't think you can do that, right? I think the technology is so integrated, it has to be used and useful. Anyway,
well, but that goes to the second point, Isabelle, right, of equity. In the United States, the equity issue is a little bit different from international. Yes?
Yeah, so internationally, there is still a huge divide from a digital access perspective. So I was recently in Senegal visiting some rural schools, and while the schools had access to a few computers, those computers were not in use because the school didn't have money to pay for electricity to wire those computers, nor did it have any broadband access. In the US, it looks a little different. I think we have made meaningful strides on the digital access piece, but we are still struggling on the digital use and the training and the access to tools that's still very uneven based on funding pools. And the Department of Education at the federal level just published a really interesting report on the digital divide.
So what are some answers there? What can we do to prevent this in the future? Particularly, I would say for-profit companies, they're about trying to make money. So they're not going to lower their price, right, for these schools who can't afford their product.
Yeah. So there are some efforts going on. I think there are probably two levels to your question. One is the funding streams and policy questions, and then there is a second one which is more on the professional learning side on how can we support schools and teachers and educators in accessing those tools that they are the most excited about and that they feel can make the greatest difference in their contexts.
So Denise, when it comes to my great-great-great-great-great-grandchild who is now a teacher, and some new technology comes out, the company will also have a chip that they can put into their head so they know how to use the technology. It's all going to be solved.
Oh my gosh. Well, I think
let's get to the third one, which is, if I understand correctly, Isabelle, that how do we know that the software is any good or the technology is any good?
That is a great place for us to stop, pause, because when we come back, people are going to want to come back and listen to the second half of the show where we're talking about how do we know if this technology is any good. And I want to hear the famous answer from Isabelle, but also the famous Dan Schwartz litmus test. So stick with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back. This is Schools In with Denise Pope and Dan Schwartz, and we are speaking with Isabelle Howe today about basically getting products into schools and some of the issues. We've already talked about the equity issue, affordability, and now I think, Dan, we're going to talk about...
I want to go back to the question of how do we know they're good products? So let me give a run up to this. So education is a very inefficient market. The consumer may not know what's good, right? So it's hard to tell if something's good learning, particularly if you're considering a 10, 15-year timeline. So market forces may not work to find the best product, right?
Wait. Market forces would
may
normally
not work.
They would normally work because good products, more people will want the good products and the old products will die out. Yeah?
Yeah, and they can discern I can tell my washing machine is better than my old washing machine.
Okay,
something like that.
It.
Whereas education, it's harder to tell because the output, good learning, your child's development, it's harder to see. So what I've heard, and I don't know if this is true, but what I've heard is that most superintendents, when they're deciding whether to purchase some educational product, don't look to evidence. They go ask other superintendents, what have you used? And has it worked for you? So it's really tough. So the question is, how do we evaluate whether these products are any good? And should some body take responsibility for this? Like the FDA takes a lot of responsibility for drug testing, right? But we don't really have one in education. So Isabelle, help. How do we solve this problem?
That's a good question.
Yeah, and thank you for the great question. And let me actually just give a few stats to emphasize your point, Dan, because those are really interesting. One is a little bit of an old stat, but it's a few years old, where I know a great organization surveyed this education decision makers, including a lot of superintendents. And what they found is exactly in line with what you were sharing. They found that only 11% of education decision makers were looking at any types of evidence to make a purchasing decision on an edtech tool. Okay. The other stats that I really like, which is also in line with all these themes, is that only 7% of global edtech tools have any form of rigorous evidence attached.
Only 7%,
yeah. So that doesn't necessarily mean that the 93% remaining are not working. Let's be clear. What it means is that we don't know. Okay. So there is a lot of work, both on the product development side and the connection to research and for academia to be closer to those product developers, as well as on educating decision makers on some of those techniques of evaluation and what makes a validation of a product. So there have been a lot of efforts on this over the years. A lot of people are working on it, including us, of course, because we have a big role to play, I think, in improving some of those stats and improving learning outcomes for children and educators. But there is a lot of work here, and some examples have been, for example, at the federal level, there still is a clearinghouse that looks at different products. There is Ed Reports that does a great job at listing what is working. So there are some great initiatives that exist, but we need a lot more of those to continue improving that connection between what we know from research and then the application in the real world.
So can we possibly make a consumer reports, where they go and they take this car and they drive it around and they then have these 6 areas where they tell you it was a good car or not? Like, would that work in education? Or and companies couldn't, fund them to do the research. It would have to be independent.
Yeah, there have been some attempts at this, and there are some great partners like Common Sense Media that has a listing of edtech tools with some ratings that are coming from educators and maybe some for some of them from parents. So there are some attempts at this, but it's again, there needs to be more. And I would argue that with a new phase that we are in, with a lot of AI tools, that artificial intelligence, coming into play, with a lot of new innovations happening, as we all know at the moment, including a lot of innovations in education. This is actually feels like a right time to think through what could be better ways to connect research and edtech developers.
Yeah. So my solution to this so far is to create a Master's of Science in Educational Data Science at the School of Education, with the hope that these students will be able to sort of play that role. It's interesting. About half of them want to start their own companies. That's
a problem, right? Because we actually don't want them to start their own companies. I want them to go and help all these superintendents learn the right questions to ask and learn how to evaluate the products. Like, it's
I agree. As this was going on, I was thinking we should get those students to go talk to superintendents and principals and ask them, what would you like to know?
Right.
What should they collect data and analyze it about, as opposed?
Go ahead.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, if you're a parent listening to this, I think you would be a little bit horrified. Like, it's a little bit of the wild, wild west. Like, products are coming into schools that affect our kids, and nobody's checking for standards, and nobody's checking, like, the FDA on, like, what could possibly go wrong. That's scary.
Yes, it is. Although it's a great opportunity for innovation.
Isabelle, what do you think?
Yeah, they are obviously, not to say that there is no regulation or policy around all of this. They are, especially on privacy and other dimensions of safety for children in schools. So let's be clear, there are some policy frameworks that exist.
From the federal government, you're saying?
From the federal government and from some states too.
Okay.
That districts and superintendents are obviously very close to. So, just to clarify on this, where there is less or a lot more that could be done is on this question about evidence and how are those solutions really supporting children and educators, and educators, depending on who they are serving, or administrators. There are a variety, obviously, of different people who are benefiting from those tools.
So it's less scary as a parent. Like, I know my kid's going to be okay, but now I'm just pissed that maybe my tax money is going to something that isn't working.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
Still a little less scary, but still equally frustrating.
Yeah, yeah. So there was a big piece of regulation. Sorry, that one more comment. There was one big piece of regulation that has made some impact, called ESSA, a few years ago, that has been asking and requesting actually schools to start making a portion of their decisions based on some levels of evidence. So there has been some progress on the policy side, but it's a small portion of those tools that need to comply with that requirement on evidence. So most of those purchasing decisions are not required to comply.
You know, Denise, an attitude like yours is why your great-great-great-grandchild's going to be in exactly the same classroom you are.
I mean, and I'm such an optimist. Like, this is so not like me. Isabelle, I promise this is so not like me. Go ahead.
You can do a lot of sniff tests. You look at things and you can sort of look at it and sort of say, yeah, I don't think this is a good idea, or this is a good idea. The concern about evidence, I don't want to harp on this too long, but is it most of the evidence will be very short term? Like, did the kid get the next math problem right? Right. And so it's going to really push things towards highly measurable outcomes that may not be the kinds of grand things we want for our children. So that would be a concern. But I'd like to switch it for a second. Because the bottleneck is, or the monopoly of the pathways to products into schools has been broken. I see a lot of students and non-students at the college level, graduate level, trying to make educational products. And so one of my favorite was a student who made something called Nomster Chef. And what you would do is you would order a box, and this box would come home. And in it, there'd be like plastic knives and food, and you'd cook with your child. There's like a very easy menu that the kid could follow. I thought it was a great idea. I gave like $100 to a Kickstarter. and I saw her like 2 years later. And I said, how's it going? She said, I had to stop. And why? This was a great idea. And she said, nobody told me you need marketing. You need a budget for marketing. So Isabelle, what's it look like? It used to be on TV, you'd see an advertisement or call this number if you're an inventor and we'll help you get going. Is there anything around for all these people who are trying to bring their great ideas to schools as products?
Yeah, so it depends on the specific product, but there are some multiple ways to distribute products into schools. It depends on whether you're targeting individual classrooms or district level, and so there are different avenues for distributions of products that exist. There are some consortium of schools that are looking at innovations and that are more willing to try different things at the beginning when a product might be really early stage. And on your point, then, it's maybe even riskier in terms of adoption, but those school networks might be more amenable to try, and the parents know that this is this might be the case and are comfortable with that situation. And then there are, various conferences where that connect schools and some of those, solutions and product developers where people connect and see there is a mutual need that can be met. But I think there is a big difference between those tools that target because some target parents, some target classrooms, some target district levels. So there are different types of organizations that can support the expansion of those products depending on the particular example. In your case, it was more parents, if I understood the situation.
But I'm getting started. I've got this great idea. Now what? Like, I'm all by myself in a basement, trying to figure this out. I need money, I need expertise. Like, is there a pathway for me?
Yeah. What's the path if you're sitting in your basement wanting to do this? What's the pathway?
Yeah, Dan, it's a great question. And so, by the way, it's the same question as any startup in any field, any industry. Education is no different from that standpoint. You need to start small, and you need to start with a handful of partners that love your solution. So whether they are parents, whether they are schools, whether they are educators, you need to figure out with your initial set of a few teachers, few parents, few schools, if a solution that people are really enjoying using. And then from there, you can start expanding. Word of mouth is the ideal. So from this initial set of users who love your solution, then you start getting referrals effectively from this group of users, and that starts spreading. And then you can use more different types of other channels as you continue growing. But the initial set is a lot of trying to find like your first few users that are going to love what you do. And so it's a lot of who you know, or networking with key people. And we have classes that help on that front, such as Lean Launchpad or the Learning Design Challenge at Stanford, that helps some of our students who are interested in doing this, in finding this initial set of users that you can try your solution with and test it.
And so so that's good. So now I've got a fan base, and I realized I need $1 million.
Yeah.
Then what happens?
Yeah. So you have multiple pools of funding that you can access, that one can access. Ranging from one group is called angel investors or angel philanthropists, depending if you are a nonprofit or a for-profit. But essentially a group of wealthy individuals or families that want to support your solution, and those are called either angel investors on the for-profit side, or angel philanthropists on the grant side. You also have the second pool that you can go to is they are a set of grants, so non-dilutive capital for nonprofit or for-profit that exists, that support innovation in education. One that I personally really admire is SBIR, which is a pool of funding affiliated with the Institute of Education Sciences, which is open to innovators in education that actually are aiming for some form of evidence early on. So it's a great way for innovation and evidence to be paired early on. A third pool then is what is called seed funds. So this initial group of investors that are very comfortable with very early stage, very risky type of investments early on. And then the last pool that I was part of for many years is called impact funders, impact investing. And that's a newer category of funders that are seeking to have both impact in the world, positive impact, both socially or environmentally, combined with positive financial returns. So it's a concept of doing good and doing well financially combined.
Thank you, Isabelle. There's been a lot we can take away from this conversation. Denise, you go first.
Oh, okay. Oh my gosh. Okay. Putting me on the spot. I think there's so much, but the main thing is, as we build these new tools, I think we really need to focus on effectiveness, right? We want them to work, and we also really need to think about equity.
So on the effectiveness side, it's important to pay attention to the research that sort of says how you can do things well. Don't just innovate and then see if it works. You can incorporate the research to make the product better from the start. On the business side, I really like the blueprint Isabelle walked us through. Find that core group to trial and navigate the development of the product. Find investors that align with your goal, and make sure that after all that, you have some money so you don't get stuck in your parents' garage when you discover you've got to market the tool, because there's so much stuff out there. You need a way for people to pay attention to what you've done.
Yeah, I think that's right. It's really hard to break through. And of course, we don't want people stuck in their parents' garages. So lots of great advice. Thank you. Thank you again, Isabelle, for chatting with us today. And thank you all for listening to this episode of Schools In. Remember to subscribe to our show on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you tune in. I'm Denise Pope.
And I'm Dan Schwartz from my parents' garage.